We're in chapter 6 talking about psychological disorders in a psychology textbook. And the past couple of classes, what we have done, we've started off looking at how did the writer create a conceptual framework that you can learn so that you can relate everything you're learning past that to that conceptual framework. And the conceptual framework was first, psychology affects the brain. So everything that you're going to read about is going to be about how the brain affects behavior or thinking or what have you. And it said abnormal behavior in psychology is, if it's a mental illness, it affects thinking, behavior, and social interaction. So every psychological disorder and everything you learn about psychological disorders are going to relate to thinking, behavior, and social interaction. But the thing that you're going to be able to use most, and this is what you need to do with every course you take, it doesn't matter what it is, get the conceptual framework up front. It's going to talk about the criteria of abnormal behavior. And it's deviant, it's atypical, it's maladaptive, it means it interferes with the functioning of your life, it's personally disruptive, and the key is personally disruptive over time. This is the conceptual framework. Everything's going to fit into that. Then we started reading about anxiety disorders. We're getting into a specific set of disorders. There's like 5 of them they'll talk about. And the one we looked at last class and for homework was generalized anxiety disorder. But first, they had an introduction. And the introduction said that you've got normal anxiety. And then it compared it by saying, in contrast, to abnormal anxiety. And it gave you the symptoms and what have you to look at. And that's just a framework. But what's important about that is every single psychological disorder that they're going to talk about in the book is going to be organized this way. It will start off saying what is normal, and then it'll say what is abnormal. And then it'll tell you about the abnormal stuff, and then it'll tell you what do they think tends to cause this. Remember we talked about theories, psychological? It will talk about what cause does the research now support, saying this is the cause for the specific disorder. And sometimes they overlap. Who's got a book I can grab real quick? Yours? Thank you. Okay, 140... yeah, make it 147. Kimberly says 147. We'll do that. What book do I have here? This book's not right. What's wrong with this book? Can I borrow your book? Thank you. Something's not right. Right here. It started off. It made a comparison. I'm going to show you with each one of them so you kind of have a sense of what to look for. Because once you see a pattern with a writer, you start seeing the pattern again and again. And this one, generalized anxiety disorder, starts off when you are worried about getting a speeding ticket. You know why? Because you're anxious. There is a specific cause. And the very next one says generalized anxiety disorder. There isn't a specific cause. How it's like and how it's normal. If we jump over to the next one, turn over the page, panic disorder. It says, much like everyone else, you might sometimes have specific experience that sends you into a panic. You do this, you do that, do that. And then it says in the second paragraph, see that they're setting you up with normal panic. People get panicked every now and then. But it says in panic disorder, however, which means they switch gears, they're going to tell you how this is abnormal. It showed you normal, and now it's going to show you. If we jump to the next page and it says phobic disorders, it says many people are afraid of spiders and snakes, and it's going to say, well, that's normal. Then when you come down to the second paragraph, it's going to say a fear becomes a phobia. So it's going to tell you when this fear you have suddenly shifts into a disorder. Does everyone get a sense of how this is how the book's organized? And it's very important to pay attention to that. And it will do it with all of these. Sometimes it uses the word however, sometimes it uses the word contrast. It does a bunch of things of that sort. So that's where we're headed at this point. Now, the other thing, and we've talked a little bit about this, I need to talk about time. And how many of you taken the FYE class, Academic Success class? All of you? Even the guys sleeping class? We should really get a picture. No, don't get a picture now. You're going to learn about time management, and they're going to say you need to find a time when you study. But within reading and learning, there is a component of time. In fact, there are several components of time that if you take advantage of these time intervals, the brain learns and remembers better. So let's start off with the first one. When you have to learn something, if you can divide it up over time, you're far more likely to remember it. So we talked about this just a little. Remember, we said, let's say you're comprehending at 100%. Well, let's say you're comprehending at 80%. You're going along, you're doing just fine, and all of a sudden, your mind's going over every word. You get to the bottom of the page, your eyes actually went back and forth over everything, and you don't even remember your eyes doing that. Everybody's had that experience. Everyone has that experience. The more extroverted you are, the faster it happens. The more introverted, the less fast it happens. So, what do we do about this? Well, we know that electrical signal comes down when we're learning information. We know we got this Myelin sheath, and we know that every time new information comes over it, it wraps it around and it gets faster. So you get faster transmission. So that's an aspect of speed. But the other thing we know is, it goes out and looks for prior knowledge. This is your reading time management. If it finds prior knowledge, it grows a new dendrite. Well, when I am reading right here, and I am comprehending and understanding it, I am creating new prior knowledge. But the minute this starts to happen, I'm not doing anything. Nothing's really happening up here, and I'm wasting my time. So this is about time. However, if I get used to noticing when my mind is no longer with what's going on, and I start to feel mentally fatigued, and here's the reason you feel mentally fatigued. Because you're reading about the same stuff, related stuff, you keep sending a message down the same neural pathway. And the potassium-calcium balance gets out of sync, and that has to replenish itself in this neural pathway. So if you stop and take a 3-minute break, just think about anything else, you come right back up here. And then when you start to dip, take a break. Start to dip. I'm ADHD out the wazoo. That means I need to take them more often unless I'm really interested in it or I have a ton of prior knowledge. Have a ton of prior knowledge, it'll override it. Notice when you're interested in something, you can stick with stuff longer. If the less prior knowledge I have, so what I am doing is I'm reading this, I'm acquiring prior knowledge that helps me understand this, that helps me understand this. Otherwise, it starts to look like this. Everyone get the sense of the time within that. This is also true. This is also true for days. I've got 10 pages to read. I've got 5 days to read it. If I break it up into 2 pages per day, see, here's what the normal curve looks like. I remember what I learned first and last best. However, if I break it up over days, then I come and I tend to get this pattern that we're getting